Hello and welcome to this UniTaster On Demand event today, where we explore studying different subjects at university, and the idea is that you therefore go on to make really good university decisions. My name is John Cheek. I'm here from UniTasterDays, and I'm delighted today to be joined by David Dodd, joining us from Leeds Trinity University. With the event today, we're going to be looking at university courses in media and covering why you might be interested in studying it, what to expect on it, application tips and careers. David joining us is a program leader for the television production course at Leeds Trinity, so a really good person to be telling us about studying media and related areas at university. So David, if you don't mind, can I come to you and I'll start with why students might be interested in studying media at university?
Thanks, John. Yeah, so hopefully students are studying, perhaps have done GCSE media or film or related subjects, and then on to do A-level or BTEC in those equivalent subjects. So they've got an idea of perhaps what kind of career pathways that they want to go into regarding media. It's a very broad discipline, really. So it covers a whole range of different career pathways and job options later down the line. We don't stipulate that you have to have studied media or film or photography or any of the related subjects, but hopefully through personal statements and through your engagement with that, perhaps as a hobby, if you're a blogger or a filmmaker, in your spare time, that's really what we go for. So it's more to do with a passion for the discipline rather than necessarily having an academic background in it to start with.
Thank you, David. So next question, and I appreciate you can only talk about what you do at Leeds Trinity, but if you've got a student that's interested in studying media, but perhaps doesn't know what the course might include and what to expect, do you mind just giving us a grasp of what a student at media, well, if they study media, might encounter at university?
Sure, absolutely. So most media programs will offer some kind of combination of the practical, the nuts and bolts of filmmaking, editing, TV studio, animation, those kind of aspects, with a sort of theoretical underpinning of the industry and analysis of film or TV or media texts. We tend to offer, as well as many institutions do, a grounded sort of career pathway through that via placements. And I think if you're thinking about studying media, wherever you may go, I'd really focus on what kind of graduate outcomes and what kind of career pathways there are through placement opportunities. Some institutions will offer that as a block of time, so 5-6 weeks away from your study. Others will do that as a sort of a day release, as we do in the final year. But that's the best way to get some hands-on experience in whatever industry you're interested in. So film, TV, marketing, PR, film distribution, whatever area you're interested in. That's a really good way of finding out whether that kind of that right career path is kind of right for you, really. And from those connections, you'll find that you may get offered internships or offered back for summer work, and hopefully, as we often find, that will lead to sort of full-time graduate employability at the end. So it's a very competitive industry, but don't let I wouldn't say don't let that put you off. It's also a very sort of small world as well, so everybody kind of knows everybody else. But I would say think about that sort of seriously as a kind of a central sort of element within your degree, and then hopefully you'll get a foot in the door and get the dream job you want.
Thanks, David. So I was going to actually come on now and talk about application tips. So spoiler alert, application tips is coming, but you mentioned about careers quite a lot there, and obviously that's a big part of what a student's decision would include when they're trying to think of what they want to study at university and perhaps whether they want to go to university or not. So in terms of media and students that have kind of been through the program, can you give me a quick idea of what students, if they study media at university, might potentially go on to do in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So within my sort of discipline, TV production, students often start as sort of runners or researchers on shows. Some go in as script editors if they're going down the kind of the fictional route. Others will start within smaller production companies, at a sort of a grassroots sort of level. But production assistants, runners, researchers is kind of your gateway into the industry from my discipline. Obviously, if you're doing sort of marketing or PR, then there's sort of marketing PR assistant roles. There's lots of roles within radio as well, entry-level graduate jobs, and within the film industry as well. And also as well, content creation. We find a lot of students now are interested in freelance as a career. So sort of starting up your own business, maybe with students you meet on the course. That's an exciting way into the industry. It's not as expensive as it used to be. You can do so much at home with a laptop and a few pieces of software, particularly if you're looking at social media environment and online careers. Lots and lots of opportunity there. So it's a really sort of broad spectrum of what students can go into. And sometimes it takes you a while to find your feet. Obviously it does, but I think through the placement process and through making contacts, it's all about making those contacts as you go through. Hopefully you'll be able to find your kind of your way into the industry relatively straightforwardly. It is, as I said before, it is really competitive, but there is a real hunger and thirst for students with these particular skills. So at the moment, for example, in this country, there's a real dearth of people with editing skills. So if you're really good at editing in film and TV, then there are so many companies that are desperate for that particular skill set.
Thanks, David. I'm actually really glad you mentioned that, because we do we work with a lot of people in the media industry at UniTasterDays, and editing is, you're quite right, is one area where we whether that's editing podcasts, whether it's editing things like this video as well. So thank you. And also a shout out in terms of university career support. So David mentioned about freelance opportunities. There's loads of support for students at every university in terms of getting started if you wanted to be a freelancer. But also, if you wanted to go ahead and start a business, there's support there at university as well. So thanks for mentioning that. The final thing to come to you, David, is say the scenario that students interested in media, listen to all about the course and what it might include, excited by career prospects, therefore wants to go ahead and apply. Is there any tips? I don't know how involved, to be honest, you are with the admissions process at Leeds Trinity, but if a student was applying to media, is there anything you'd like to see in an application or anything you'd like to see subsequently in a student on a course?
Absolutely, John. I am the admissions tutor for my degree, so I get to see all the UCAS forms that come in. I would say absolutely, it's a subject where you've got to show your passion, your engagement, your interest. So anything you're doing at school or college, extracurricular work. I always say I'm really interested in students that have, if you've done stuff with your local amateur dramatics group, or you kind of community groups, that's absolutely fantastic. It shows engagement with people. It shows you've got transferable skills within that area. Also, we're finding more students as well that are doing sort of freelance kind of stuff at a much younger age. So if you've got your own YouTube channel, if you're creating, as you said, John, your own podcasts with friends, absolutely, that is fantastic in terms of just showing you're going to go in that extra mile. You're doing stuff out of the classroom. If you're creating your own, making your own short films with friends, or writing scripts, or just going to see live theatre, or anything that's sort of media related, that I can see that you want to go to the next step. I know sometimes within media courses at school and college, you don't have a great deal of opportunity to use kind of kit and kind of some of the kind of the technical things that we can offer, but you can do a lot of stuff at a kind of a lower entry level that shows your engagement with the subject matter. And you do have to be a person that is quite courageous in your own personality. You've got to be someone that is a bit of a live wire, that wants to go that extra mile. So anything like that, I would say that I would definitely pick up on it in your personal statement. Yeah.
Thank you, David. And then the final one from me, it's actually a personal one for you, but it's always interesting for students, I think, to hear from the reasons that you got into media. So do you mind just finishing by kind of telling us what captured your interest in media, and just give us a brief insight into what you've done career-wise to get to this point at Leeds Trinity?
Yeah, absolutely. I had quite an interesting route into academia. So the first thing that I remember watching as a teenager, which really sparked my interest, was a 6-part series by Dennis Potter called The Singing Detective, which if you're as old as I am, in your 50s, it was a real kind of game changer. And I remember watching that on my little sort of telly in my bedroom and my mono earpiece, so I didn't disturb my parents in the bungalow. And it was like, this is the most incredible thing. And I knew from that point, whatever TV meant down the line, I wanted to be involved with that subject in some form or another. And then I went into, I started life as a postman. I went to university. I did a master's degree in communication studies. I then became a stand-up comedian. So I did that for quite a few years. So that gave me, I think, the confidence in sort of stagecraft and communicating my passions for the subject. I then worked in various sort of administrative roles within universities, and then became a press officer. And then I got the opportunity to do a little bit of teaching at my current institution. And I thought, oh yeah, absolutely, I'll have a go at that. And that's really sort of took off, and that was 22 years ago. So and my research interests were around performative teaching and what we call pedagogy. So how we engage with students through learning and teaching is what I'm interested in. I'm also really interested in sort of particular crime drama. I do a lot of work around that, sitcoms, and food and cookery programming is another particular interest of mine. But it's a fantastic subject to be around, because as you said, John, it's always, it's evolving all the time, isn't it? And there's a real thirst and a real hunger for really sort of keen, engaged graduates in media. It often gets a bit of a bad press. People say, "Oh, media, will it actually lead? Am I going to study a subject that will lead to, a definite sort of graduate job at the end?" And I would say absolutely, yes, it does. It may not have done 10, 15 years ago, but I think at the moment there's a real sort of there's a real sort of a buoyant job market. In the region where I live in West Yorkshire, you've got all your major players here. You've got Channel 4, BBC, ITV, independent production companies. It's a much bigger world than it used to be. So yeah, if you've got the passion and the skill set, absolutely go for it. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's so great to hear about your journey, but also touching on transferable skills that students gain as part of the course, and really, really appreciate that. So, David, a big thank you from me. Just to confirm, today we've been looking at university courses in media. It's part of the On Demand platform. So, big thank you, David, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you very much.